Hi, this is Sarah in Studio 304. In this video, I'll show you how to make adjustments to your photos using adjustment layers in Photoshop. So this colorful chart towards the top of your workspace on the right is called a histogram. If you don't see the histogram, you can add it to your workspace by going to the Window menu at the top of the screen and selecting Histogram. Each color in your photo has a brightness value. A histogram represents the overall brightness distribution in your image. Basically, how many colors are bright and how many are dark. The far left represents black, so the values towards the left are the darker values or the shadows. The far right is the white, so these are the brighter colors or highlights. And then the middle part of the histogram represents the midtones, just the normal colors. So for example, if all the columns here were about the same height, then there would be an even distribution of light values in the photo. But if the columns in the dark side, for example on the left, are much higher than the rest, then that means that most of the pixels in your photo are dark. A histogram can tell you whether or not your image has been properly exposed, whether the lighting is harsh or flat, and what adjustments will work best. There's no one ideal histogram that you're trying to make. It just depends on what you want to convey in your photo. So in this video, we're going to make some adjustments and pay attention to how they affect the histogram here. And then to make it easier to kind of read and see what's going on in the histogram, we'll just make one adjustment to the way it's displayed here. To the right of the histogram tab, there's a little icon for the menu. Click on that and change it to the expanded view, which makes it bigger and gives you more information down here. You don't have to worry about that, but just go up to where it says channels, and instead of colors, change it to RGB, and that makes it, the bars here, just white, and it just makes it easier to read. And then you can click on that menu icon again and change it back to the compact view to make it smaller and take away that extra stuff. So adjustment layers are dynamic rather than static, and that means you can turn them on and off, and you can make more adjustments later if you change your mind about the amounts that you've put in. So the adjustment panel in your workspace is on the right side of the screen below the histogram. If you don't see this adjustment panel with these little icons, just go to the Window menu at the top and choose Adjustments. Each icon adds a different type of adjustment layer. Hover your mouse over the icons to see what each one is. So that's brightness contrast, that's levels, that's curves, and so on. So looking at the histogram for this photo, the values are much higher on the right side where the highlights are, and very low on the left for shadows, and there's no bars at all in the very far left. So that's showing us that this photo is washed out, which you can see here that it's very light colored and there's not a lot of shadows. So we can adjust that by, first we'll try changing the brightness and the contrast. So we'll click on the brightness contrast icon in the adjustment panel, and you'll see that adds a new layer down here in the layers panel, and that's the adjustment layer right there. And then it also opens up this panel with sliders, one for brightness and one for contrast. So there is an auto button, so you can click that to see what settings Photoshop would use just on automatic detection. It might take a second for it to analyze the photo and make the adjustments. You can see what that looks like. You can see the numbers here have changed. If you want to continue adjusting it, you can move the slider. So moving the brightness slider to the right will make the image brighter by expanding the highlights. So if we pull it all the way over here, you can see in the histogram what that did and how it looks in the photo. Very washed out, very bright and white. If you move it to the left, you will expand the shadows and make the photo darker. So you can see how that really added to this left shadow area and made the photograph a lot darker. So for this photo, we do want to move it to the left a little bit, but not quite that far, so that about there is good. If you take it too far to the left, the image could start to look dull, and you don't want that either. So somewhere in the middle is good. The other option in this type of layer is contrast. Contrast means the difference between the darks and the brights. So if you move the slider to the right, you'll increase the contrast, and you can see what that does in the photo and in the histogram. And if you move it to the left, that lowers the contrast, and you can see a very low contrast image and what that looks like there. So try to get it to something, just move the slider around until you find something that looks good to you. And then when you like the way that your settings look, you click on this double arrow up at the top of the panel, and that will collapse it into this toolbar here. That's the info panel. Another adjustment we can try with this photo is Vibrance. So Vibrance, if you just move your mouse over the icons, you'll find the Vibrance adjustment layer. And that adds another layer in the panel, and again opens up a window here with sliders. Vibrance changes the saturation or the intensity of the colors in the photo, but Vibrance only affects colors with low saturation, but not colors that are already intense. Just like with brightness contrast, the slider moving it to the right for Vibrance will increase the vibrance. You can see what that looks like if you take it all the way, and how the histogram changes. And then to the left, decreases the vibrance, and you can see that takes out almost all the colors. Just again, there's no auto button here, so just move it until it looks like what you want. Saturation is different because it affects all of the colors in the photo, no matter what their starting levels are. So you want to use this sparingly, or you could end up with some really strange color effects. So that really makes everything look really strange because it is changing all of the saturation levels. So we'll leave it not much of an adjustment with saturation. And again, when you're done, you click on this double arrow here to collapse that panel. One final way that we'll look at to adjust the colors in the photo is the color balance adjustment. So color balance is in the second row of icons in the adjustment panel. Click on that. Again, it adds another layer and brings up this panel here. The sliders correspond here to different color pairs. And these are colors that are opposites in terms of digital images. So if you see too much red, for example, in your photo, you can move the slider towards the cyan end to take out some red. Or to add red, you would move it towards red. You want to leave this tone drop-down set to midtones. That's the default. And also you want to check this box for preserve luminosity. And that makes it so you're only affecting the colors in the photo, but not the brightness levels. And again, you'll click the double arrow to collapse the panel when you're done. And so now that we've made some adjustments and we have some layers here in the layers panel, let's look at the things you can do here. If you want to turn off any of these layers, you just click the eyeball, and that takes away the adjustment that you did in that layer. If you want to change this adjustment more, you just double click on the icon of the black and white circle there, and that brings up the panel again, and you can change whatever adjustment you made there. You don't have to be afraid of making any changes in your photo because you can always take them away, and you can just take away a whole layer if you click on it and then tap the delete key on your keyboard. That removes it altogether. You could also move the order of the layers, and sometimes that could make a difference in what the photo looks like. So once you've added adjustment layers, you can't save your image as a JPEG file anymore if that's what you started out with, or any other type of file. You have to save it as a Photoshop document, and that has the .psd file extension. So when you save in that format, it will let you continue editing your layers in Photoshop. If you want to save it as a JPEG after you've added layers, you can do that by going to File at the top and going to Save As, And that will bring up the window where you can choose the format, and there you can choose JPEG and any number of other formats there. So that smashes all your layers down into one file that you can email, you can share it online, or use for other purposes. In the next video, I'll show you how to undo your changes using the history tool.